The Creeping Frost Occultist. This is a build that scales cold damage over time. Through the use of our multiple freezing abilities, we are able to massively slow down the action speed of pretty much any monster in the game, including the bosses at the very top. Because of this, it ends up being a very safe build. It gives you plenty of extra time to be able to dodge boss mechanics. It makes it so that enemies have a little bit harder time getting to you, and overall accounts for a very safe playstyle. That's why this build is the premier new player build that I always suggest out of all of my build guides. If you are a new player, or if you are coming back to the game after a while, or you simply just want a very easy time bossing where you can take your time, slow down, and get everything that you need to know without having to worry about being one shot from off screen and not being able to see what it was, all that sounds good to you, then this is the build that you're looking for. Now with this new patch, I have spent some pretty extensive time making massive updates to the path of building for this. We now have a new low-life version of the build, which has been highly requested. We have also made significant improvements to all of the notes, including crafting information. If you've always wondered how to craft each piece of gear, maybe you wanted to know how to make one of those cool wands, or you wanted to know how to craft, like, say, an energy shield belt or something like that, all the information is now in the notes. We have made drastic improvements to the leveling trees, meaning that if you wanted something that was very straightforward for a very new player, the leveling trees have been massively optimized to give you a very simple and straightforward approach. And all of this has been detailed in the new notes section. I've spent quite a bit of time making sure that the notes in the path of building are extremely extensive this time. So if you can't find the information in this video, it'll probably be in the notes. And last but not least, we have spent an extensive amount of time getting a Discord channel set up for each individual build guide that I'm going to be putting out. If you aren't able to use Path of Building because maybe you're a console player or you don't have access to a computer with Path of Building on it, then you'll be able to use these channels and they have all of the information that you could need. Make sure to join my Discord, link down in the description if you're interested in seeing one of these channels. Now I do want to let you know that this patch is going to be a massive change to the way that Path of Exile is played, and due to that, some things are only going to be able to be figured out after we actually get into the game and play. I have done my best to account for everything that we've known from the patch notes to let you have the best experience possible, but there quite possibly may be some inaccurate information just because we don't know the full scope of how these changes are going to feel. That being said, I will do everything in my power to update them as we learn more. Now I want to set your expectations and give you a couple disclaimers about what this build is and what this build is not capable of. So make sure that you listen to these so you can kind of figure out for yourself, is this the one you want to choose, or do you maybe want to move on to another build guide? I'm only going to be covering 3 builds this time around. However, there is going to be a separate video that's going to give you short information on every single other one of my build guides, so if you're wondering about one of those, it'll be in that video coming soon. So for this build, some things that you should expect. If you are a brand new player to this game who has no knowledge whatsoever and you're worried about being able to understand stuff, this is the build for you. This build requires no specialty gear, no specialty skills, and absolutely nothing to be able to complete all of the content in the game. Its clear speed is quite good, however, its movement speed is not super fast. Now when it comes to bossing, this is not a fast bossing build. As you might have seen in some of the previous videos, the bosses do not die insanely quickly, however, they still do die at an adequate pace. The good thing about this build when it comes to bossing is the fact that bosses move in slow motion. All of their abilities are easily telegraphed and you can absolutely get out of the way of almost anything. When you stack that with a very high amount of defensive layers and a good effective health pool, this build is excellent for bossing, especially if you want to learn their abilities. Because when the bosses move in slow motion, you can actually see what they're doing. And then when you move over to maybe a higher powered build or a different build in the future, you can be like, oh yeah, I know what ability that is, and be able to dodge it much more easily. Now I did say that this build is still focused mainly on new players, however, veteran players can make some use out of this build as well. It does have a newly updated low-life version that is adequate for very high-end gaming. If you do want to spend a ton of currency on this build and push it to the limit, it still is very capable of doing that. So now that you've got an idea of what this build is capable of, let's jump into game and take a little bit of a closer look. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content, make sure that you like this video so that other people can enjoy it too. And if you're part of the huge percentage of people who are still not subscribed to this YouTube channel, make sure that you do that so that these videos will show right up in your feed. You can always change your mind later, and I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. Now without further ado, let's get back into the video. Alright boys, so this is the Creeping Frost Occultist, a staple of my channel that I have kept around pretty much since the beginning. This build is excellent for new players. It is very easy to get going, doesn't require any gear, doesn't require any special skills or anything like that. It's a build that you can start as a new player and be able to complete every single bit of content in the game, as long as you are willing to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. Now, this build guide is going to be a little bit different from my previous ones because we're not going to go super in depth and everything, and that is because I have spent a ton of time getting the path of building for this build to be absolutely as good as I can possibly get it. I have spent a ton of time. You can check that out later in the video, so make sure to stick around because I'm going to go over all the stuff in the path of building. I've put a lot of work into it this time around. So hopefully you'll be able to just use it as a one-stop shop guide that you can have up while you're starting the new league and not have to worry about anything. And anything that isn't in the actual path of building will be in this video guide. So I do want to give one quick disclaimer. This build has completely ramshackle gear. I'm talking about my current character right now. All of the gear that I have equipped on my character is random stuff that I found in my bank, straight up. I just threw this together. So all of the video that you saw earlier is literally just random gear that I assembled and put on my character. The most expensive piece of gear that I've got here is this 6-link shafts. It's not even a good 6-link shaft. It's corrupted for +2 level of socketed curse gems. Beyond that, the rest of this stuff is literally just stuff that I had in my bank. It's not optimized. I tried my best to like enchant some good stuff on it and all that kind of stuff, but nothing here is special. On top of that, my cluster jewels are pretty mediocre. I've got this nice Watcher's Eye that I found, which is cool, but the rest of this gear is not that good. So if you saw all of the previous clips, just understand that the ceiling for what is capable of this build is so much higher than what you're seeing here. I just literally don't have the gear for it, and we swapped over into standard, and it's like impossible to be able to put the stuff together. So just keep that in mind. Now, I do want to give you a brief explanation of the skills. Now, keep in mind I am on the low life version of this build, so it's not going to be the same exact skills that you'll have when you're leveling. All of that is detailed in the path of building, so keep that in mind. Now, the main ability and the premier ability of Creeping Frost is Creeping Frost itself. Now, you're going to see that we have a couple triggered abilities that pop here, but kind of ignore those. We're just looking at the 5 giant explosions that are coming out here and covering the ground in Creeping Frost. A Creeping Frost is a damage over time ability. It has 2 portions. There is a on-hit ability, which is the explosions that you see that happen, and if you do it close to your character, you'll notice that you can get these to shotgun. Now, while you're leveling, you can actually use this to your advantage. Very early on, if you are using, say, like lesser multiple projectiles, you can keep this very close and shotgun and overlap the explosions there to do more damage on a single target. However, the main portion of the damage is really going to be that damage over time. Now, to complement this, we also do use Cold Snap. Cold Snap is going to be an ability that we use mainly as a supporting skill. It is just another little extra bit of damage that you can use to get some more cold damage over time. Now, the cool benefit of Cold Snap is that there are 2 portions of it. There is going to be the normal Cold Snap and the Vol Cold Snap. Now, when we get into the map, I can show you a little bit more of Vol Cold Snap, but for right now, the main upside that I feel to Cold Snap is not only the damage, but anytime that you do kill an enemy within the Cold Snap area, you gain a Frenzy Charge. And Vol Cold Snap actually makes it so that you gain a Frenzy Charge per second while enemies are inside of your Vol Cold Snap. So not only does this do some extra damage for us, it also gives us some extra damage in general. Now, early on in the game, you're going to be using an Arcanist brand, and that Arcanist brand will have its curses linked to it, and that's going to be a very easy way for you to apply your curses. However, later on, there's going to be some complications because you are going to want to start using Storm brand for Elemental Equilibrium. Now, the reason for this is that since we do have Elemental Equilibrium, this is a keystone that makes it so that anytime you hit an enemy with any kind of damage, it gains resistances to those kinds of damage and loses resistances to all the other kinds of elemental damage. So if you look at our Storm brand right here, you'll notice that it only does lightning and fire damage. It does 0 cold damage. So why this is important is because we're hitting with lightning and fire just because we have some on our gear. That doesn't really matter. It only matters that you don't have any cold damage added to spells on your gear. Because when we're hitting an enemy and we put the Storm brand on them, that Storm brand attaches and it hits constantly. Because our abilities have a hit and a damage over time function, we do apply the other version of Elemental Equilibrium, but Storm brand hits constantly, so it overwrites it all the time. So as long as you don't spend too much time casting and hitting the enemy, and you just let those degen zones do the work, you will do a ton of damage. Now beyond that, we do use Flame Dash as our movement skill. One cool thing to know about Flame Dash is that if you don't spam it, it is actually instant. When you use the Flame Dash ability, what you should be mainly focusing on is only using it as just a quick get out of dodge kind of ability. You don't want to spam it like this because you notice that as soon as I start spamming it, how it gains this cast time. If you only use it occasionally, the cast time is instant. Now, Flame Dash is going to be nerfed in 3.15, but it got the least nerfed out of all of the common movement abilities, so it's perfectly fine to keep using. Dash got pretty heavily nerfed, and Smoke Mine got relatively nerfed, but Smoke Mine is still good for leveling. Now, beyond that, in the low life version, we have a ton of auras. We're using 6 of them. All of the auras do different things. We have life gain from Vitality, since we're using the Zealot's Oath with our low life version here. We've got Hatred, we've got Malevolence, Violence, we've got Zealotry, Discipline, all kinds of good stuff. And when we get into the map, I'll show you exactly how Vol Discipline works because it's pretty important. One other thing that I do want to talk about when it comes to skills is going to be this Trigger Wand. In the notes of the Path of Building, which we'll go over later, I talk extensively about how to get all of the gear and everything that you need to do. So if you're wondering about how to obtain a specific piece of gear, you can always check the notes. And then a secondary option would be going to my Discord and asking some of the community members there. Now in this wand, we're going to be using various abilities, and these abilities change as you go to different versions of the build. For example, right now I'm using Frost Bomb, Frostbite, and Cold Snap. The reason that I'm doing this is because I don't have enough room in my gems to have a Hex Touch Stormbrand anymore. In the previous version I would, but because I'm using so many auras now, I don't have room for that. So on the normal version of the build, you'd use like Hex Touch, Stormbrand, and then you would do Frostbite and Elemental Weakness, and that would be your 4-link. Because the Occultist gets access to Double Curse just naturally, that is due to Malediction. So that would be what we would use earlier. Once again, all in the Path of Building. However, we do want to use Frost Bomb because this is going to give us some cold exposure and it's going to reduce life regeneration. We're going to be using Frostbite as our curse, as I said before, and then an extra Cold Snap. The reason for this is specifically because we want to gain those frenzy charges and keep them up. That is pretty much it for the abilities. As I said, the gear is just completely ramshackle. It's random stuff that I just tossed together. Enough talking. Let's actually get into a map and show you what this build is capable of and what it's going to feel like. Remember my disclaimer, my gear sucks. There's nothing good about my gear. It could be 100 times better, potentially even more than that. What we're going to show you here is we're going to just be doing a random tier 16 map. This is going to be on Awakener 8. This is my normal standard atlas. This also does have 4 Sextant modifiers on it. It's got some pretty dangerous ones in here too. We've got 4 scarabs that we're going to be using here, as well as we are going to do Infused Harbinger. Now, this is a tier 16 map, as I said before. This is Shipyard. Shipyard is a map with a relatively dangerous boss, and we've got some interesting mods on here, so I'll show you. We have a ton of stuff going on. The unique boss is going to have a lot more life. It's going to be very dangerous. We're going to have Beyond, a bunch of extra mobs, and then also we're going to take increased damage of various types. So this map is going to be relatively dangerous. However, what you'll notice is that because this build slows so effectively, we don't really have to worry too much about enemies getting near us. We simply just stay away from them and they can't really keep up with us. There's not much that they can do. So even in this map with Beyond mobs and all kinds of crazy stuff going on, they're so slow that they don't really get to do much to you. Now that right there that you just saw was Vol Discipline. You see how my energy shield just went back up to maximum and stayed at maximum there? The idea is that what Vol Discipline does is it allows you to just start recharging your energy shield instantly, and because we have a passive skill that is called Wicked Ward, energy shield recharge is not interrupted by damage if recharge began recently. That means is that when you pop this Vol Discipline, you are guaranteed to go to full unless something kills you. So it will not stop. Your energy shield recharge is not going to just randomly stop at some point. This is also going to be Vol Cold Snap that I talked about earlier. It puts this giant zone around you like this, which extra slows and gives you a bunch of charges. Now this is getting a little bit dicey, and I did just actually freeze there and die, but what can you do? If you are playing the lower level version of this that isn't low life yet, instead of Vol Discipline, you can use Enduring Cry would be a very good ability that you could use that. It's all in the Path of Building, but you kind of get the idea. So let's move over towards the boss so you can kind of see how bossing would go. Now, as I said, Shipyard does have some pretty dangerous bosses, and we have put Maven on this map. So Maven is kind of a problem for a lot of builds because of all of the regen that she causes. That's probably the #1 thing that most people complain about, is that the Maven just makes the boss heal like 8 times over. Well, this particular build completely ignores that. We don't have any issues with Maven regen. Between Frostbomb and our Occultist Ascendancy, regen is pretty much completely stopped. Right, let's try to get through these mobs, see if we can actually get over towards the boss. Man, I didn't realize how much I actually put on this map. I was not expecting to put this many mobs into this map. I kind of just gathered a bunch of random juice and applied it to the map without thinking, and you can see I'm kind of paying for that. I've already died once. In 3.15, pretty much everything is getting nerfed, so every single build that's in the game is going to be doing quite a bit less damage, so prepare for that. You are going to have to spend a decent amount more money to get things to feel as nice as they do right now, unfortunately. I don't 100% agree with it. There's a lot of changes that are happening in the patch that I'm not very fond of, but it is what it is. GGG thinks this is best for their game, and what do I know as a lowly pleb that just plays video games and makes videos. Alright, so here are the bosses. Now, as I said previously, this build does not do a ton of actual boss damage. However, you can see how this boss is not really getting to attack very often, right? And the Maven regen is doing literally nothing. So, as you saw there, that boss was a complete joke. Normally that boss is relatively dangerous. It has a bunch of really crazy abilities, it moves really fast all around the map, but we completely made an absolute joke of that boss and just kind of got to walk around and watch it just slowly flail as it tried to do things. You get the idea how the playstyle goes. You saw how we used Vol Cold Snap to gain some frenzy charges and do some extra damage. You saw how we used Vol Discipline extensively to just make it so that we can go back to full life whenever we needed to, and all of our abilities kept us relatively safe with very, very minimal low life gear. Honestly, with this level of low life gear, I might have been safer with the previous version without even upgrading to low life, but needed to get some footage for low life. All right, we're going to swap into the Path of Building, and I'm going to show you the extensive work and changes that we've done to that, so let's go ahead and get over there. All right, boys, so we're now over here in the Path of Building, and there is a lot to go over. So first, I want to talk about the skill trees and everything there is to do with them. Now, in the Path of Building, I have made a lot of skill trees, and we're going to go over at least a little bit each one of them. You'll notice that there are 4 different sections here. These are the normal leveling skill trees. These are going to be the path that you take if you have cluster jewels. This is going to be the path that you take if you have no cluster jewels, and then these are the low life trees at the end. So let's begin with skill trees and start it from the top. Now, I have made these hopefully a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more obvious as to which points you should take when. They are sectioned by the very obvious paths that you would take. Previously, I would do these by ascendancies. However, I have decided to make it so that you know exactly which points you need to put in and where. So starting out, we're going to be going through spell damage here. We're going to stop off and grab some life and mana, go through some cold damage and cast speed, and end up at elemental overload. Elemental overload is very important early on because we do not care about crit at all. 40% more elemental damage is great. We can get enough crit chance to just be able to crit occasionally and not worry about anything else. With all of our abilities that we do have, we should be perfectly fine. On the next skill tree that we're going to be doing, this is when we're going to be grabbing Lab 1. You'll notice that we move up through our life here and carry over into all of this cold damage. We're going to pick everything up because it's a huge amount of damage here. We also do get our first ascendancy point, which is going to be Void Beacon. Void Beacon is going to make it so that nearby enemies have less cold resistance, meaning we do more damage, and it's also going to mean nearby enemies have 100% reduced life regeneration rate. This is super, super powerful for things like Maven. Whenever you stay near that Maven boss, and she's trying to sit there and regenerate it, she's not going to be able to do anything. So the next step that we're going to be taking is going to be from 33 to 46. We're going to be moving over to the left side of the tree, grabbing some damage and some life, some damage and resistances here, as well as these life nodes here. The next step is when we're going to be picking up glancing blows and getting these block nodes. This is around the time when you want to start swapping to a shield and you want to start focusing on those defenses a little bit more. This is going to be the point where the build starts to really get into its defensive layers. Block is a huge defensive layer for us, and glancing blows allows us to get up to maximum block quite easily and smooths out the damage that we take. The next step is going to be moving over here. This is when we start grabbing more of those block nodes, as I said. We're going to be grabbing these 4 block nodes here, as well as these 2 block nodes here. This is also when we do our second ascendancy. The second ascendancy is going to be Frigid Wake. This is going to mean that we can't be chilled, we can't be frozen, which are going to be really important in this next patch, because they removed that from pretty much everything. Gives us some more cold damage, and it also allows us to chill nearby enemies and take less damage from nearby enemies with hits that while they are chilled. The next step is going to be moving over here to the right. We'll finish out this life, energy shield, and int, and we're going to be getting these hybrid nodes here. This build is a hybrid life and energy shield build, so make sure that you do pay attention to both your life and your energy shield. Both are very important while leveling. This is also when we're going to be getting Lab 3, and our third lab point is going to be Vile Bastion. Now, a lot of people disagree with me on this and think that you should be taking Profane Bloom. I personally feel that Profane Bloom is not very useful. For very, very high tier clear, this would be nice. Like on those big juicy maps that I was doing before, if you are in the low life version and you are using the Chayula's amulet, you can use Profane Bloom here instead of Vile Bastion, and I might suggest it just because it'll give you some better clear, but you are going to need to have a curse on hit ring of some sort to make this worthwhile, because you are going to need cursed enemies at all times to be able to explode them, so just keep that in mind. However, for leveling, we take Vile Bastion. It makes us immune to stun while we have energy shield and gives us our main source of energy shield recovery early on in the game. Now, beyond this, we are going to move into our skill point quests. I tend to wait until the end of the game to do all my skill point quests simply because that's the easiest time to do them. Those side zones are a little bit hard and take up some time, so if you wait until the end and you just grab all of these points at once, you'll get a massive boost in damage. We're going to move all the way over to the right here. We're going to grab this health and energy shield, these damage over time mods, these block and shield nodes, as well as these cold damage nodes. That's going to be the majority of what we get. Also, this one little lone node here that I had to get because it's what evened us out. The next step that we're going to be taking is we're going to be grabbing Elemental Equilibrium. Now, if you don't know how to use Elemental Equilibrium properly, I suggest that you just simply skip this node early on. This node is very important for our higher end damage at the end game. It's not super important early on. If you don't fully understand how this node works, simply skip it until you are capable of it. Now, this is the point where we're really going to be diverging a little bit. We're going to be hitting up to level 76. This is when we were going to do our 4th lab where we get Malediction. This gives us the ability to apply an additional curse as well as increased effective curse, and it means that enemies take more damage from us and deal less damage to us while they are cursed. The other thing that we're going to do is that you'll notice that the tree shifts a little bit here. If you go between these two trees, you're going to notice that we shift over some points. This is going to be a respec of points that we're going to do. We are going to remove these spell damage nodes because they're not really efficient, and we're going to move through this jewel slot instead of going up here at the top. This gets us a little bit better pathing and saves us a few points. Now, at this point, you have multiple choices. If you have access to cluster jewels, I do suggest that you go the cluster jewel path. It is superior. However, if you don't have access to cluster jewels, you can apply the no clusters path. Now, starting with clusters, we're simply going to look at this cluster path. You'll notice we come up here into the cluster jewels, and as we go through, we're simply filling out clusters and cluster jewel points. When we move over to the non-cluster path, you'll see that we do take a couple different things. Now, the first set here is just going to be grabbing these mana and this damage node here, and then on the next set, we are going to be moving into more of these shadow nodes on the right. This gets us some solid damage as well as some utility layers, and then beyond that, we're going to be moving into Ash, Frost, and Storm. This does make us have a little bit less effective shock on us, which will be nice going forward. It's not a ton. We mainly take this for damage, and then beyond that, we do head towards Divine Judgment, and then finish out a couple of life points. That is the majority of what we'll be doing on the no clusters tree. When you do want to make the swap to low life, it is a very different tree. Make sure that you have a ton of regret orbs. I covered that extensively in the notes. And as we go through the low life tree, we fill out a couple different things. But that is it for the skill trees. Should be much more intuitive on figuring out where and when to put the skill points in. Let's move on to skills themselves. Now, there's a bunch going on in here. We have a multiple sets of leveling skills, as well as the different in-game links, as well as the low life links. So initially, you're going to be leveling with Stormblast Mine from levels 1 to 11. This is just a very solid ability. You could use Freezing Pulse if you really wanted to, but I prefer Stormblast Mine. It just does very, very solid single target damage when combined with Orb of Storms. All of your movement skills and your auras in here. It tells you how to upgrade to Creeping Frost and the abilities that you should be looking to use. And then also, whenever you are able to, you should swap to the end game links on all of your abilities. Some of these abilities, such as Cold Snap, are going to be showing you using like Controlled Destruction and stuff early on, and then later on, you will be swapping over to things like Bone Chill and Efficacy. Controlled Destruction will still actually be in there, but you'd be taking out Concentrated Effect, simply because when you do start using Rhyme Gaze, it's going to have Conk Effect on there for you anyways. And then when you are ready to transition to low life, if that's something that you want to do, make sure that you disable all of these links here. So you're going to come up here and you're going to hit disable on all of these, and then you will enable all of these links here. You'll need to change your main skill and move it around to the different sections so that you have the correct numbers for your abilities. So keep in mind also that your damage is going to matter on the left depending on what skill tree you've got, what item set you're equipping, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk a little bit about the items here. There are multiple item sets. You're going to see these budget items that we have here. These are relatively cheap items that should not be difficult to get on day 1 of the league, guaranteed. You should be able to get most of these on day 1, day 2, as long as you're making it into maps. When it comes to expensive items, these are the items that you would go for if you're looking to push the build in the hybrid sense, meaning you're not going to go low life and you want to push the build a little bit further for the life/energy shield version. You can do this. I don't necessarily suggest it, but it is possible to do, so I've put these items in here. And then there are the low life items. These are going to be the items that you would use when you do swap over into the low life version of the build. The benefits of swapping into low life are that we get a bunch of extra auras, we get some interesting recovery mechanics, as well as basically just overall more damage and more defensives. Now moving over into the configuration, these configurations are set up specifically so that this is the damage that you would do when you are just clearing a map and then you kill the boss at the end. I talk about this in the notes, and in the notes here, I will say, you know, for the actual configuration section here, it'll tell you what to change if you want to see accurate boss DPS. So I have spent a ton of time working on this path of building, and I really, really hope that it is super helpful and it can do anything that you need it to. Now, all of that being said, the path of building is very detailed. However, I am human and I am fallible, and sometimes I will mess up. So, because I sometimes mess up, you can always join my Discord, which is linked down in the description. The Discord is going to have a ton of helpful people, as well as a full channel dedicated to updates on this build and all kinds of good stuff. So there'll be a ton of information in there. There's over 10,000 community members that we have in the Discord right now, and a ton of super helpful people. I'd love for you to become a part of my community. And also, if you're interested in it, I am going to be streaming pretty much every single day through the league start. So if you want to come hang out with me, or you need a specific question that only I can answer, you can check me out on twitch.tv/bigducks, live Monday through Friday, possibly more than that, 11 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Remember, boys, if you enjoy this style of content, make sure that you like the video so that other people can enjoy it as well. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content similar to this, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I will see you guys in 3.15 Expedition League.